I am Dr. Ben Newman. I'm a coronavirus expert with 25 years experience. This is Ask Dr. Ben. I've worked on coronaviruses and not a whole lot else. And so I've had a couple of people write in personally about a video that's circulating now. It's from a thing called the Mount Vernon Schoolboard, and it's a doctor called, I've written this down, Dan Stock, who says some really weird stuff. But he says it very confidently, as if he knows what he's talking about. But we'll get to opinions on that. And also, since this is YouTube, I'm going to respond to a response to that one, because why not? And so the response that is a guy called ZDogg MD, who is like a YouTube personality and a doctor, I think. I guess I've had kind of a mixed opinion. He'll say some things that make a lot of sense and are kind of in line with the science. And sometimes he goes off and says stuff that I think is really, counterfactual. So anyway, let's go. So we're going to go point by point through this whole thing, and we're only going to do this once because I don't ever want to deal with either of these goofballs again, but especially the first one. So, first point. Since I work at a university, and this is not in my official capacity, but since I give out grades for a living, we're going to grade these two folks, and we're going to see how they do. All right, let's go. So the first point that Dr. Stock makes is that the CDC and the State Board of Health do not read science, and that everything they do is actually contrary to all the rules of science. Gravity no longer applies, apparently, in his mind, to anything that they say. So he says that, which is incorrect. ZDogg says no, but doesn't directly address that, but appears to be on the side of good sense. And so that is 1 for ZDogg, 0, unfortunately, for Dr. Stock. All right, let's go. So next point. He starts out by saying that masks don't work, and that we all know that virus sizes are too small to be filtered by masks, which is incorrect. There are several studies, and there are different kinds of masks. Now, ZDogg makes a more nuanced point, and that is that N95 masks definitely work and filter out particles of this size because it's built into it. They have to filter out 95% of the particles of that particular size to be called an N95 mask, and they have to be tested. And so he's right on that part, but he says that the other ones probably don't do anything. And there are studies where people have looked at cloth masks, gaiters, stuff like that. Now they're putting these onto a kind of a machine to measure how many particles of a certain size get through, and they do something. If I remember correctly, I thought homemade cloth masks that were tested out in a particular study blocked something like 45% of the particles as opposed to 95%. And there was a range for different masks. I think the thing they found that was most effective was a cut-up HEPA vacuum cleaner bag. And if you were able to make a mask out of that and get it to fit properly around the machine they were working with, or a human face, presumably, that was at least as good and probably a little better. It seemed to work better at high air volume. So if you were doing something that required a lot of activity, that would probably be a good one if you can figure out how to put this together. Okay, so that's another point for ZDogg, although kind of a reluctant point, but it's fair, yeah. And unfortunately, Dr. Stock is still on 0 points. All right, other points that Dr. Stock makes that ZDogg agrees with and probably shouldn't. So he's ambivalent about masks on kids. And I think if you're talking about ambivalent that kids will wear masks, yeah, I get that. But kids can do a lot of stuff. They'll surprise you, but at the same time, peer pressure is this giant thing. So I think masking on kids works, but you have to make sure that everybody does it. Like you would say that kids sitting down at a desk would probably never work because kids are always up running around and stuff like that. And there'll be some that do. But when you have the peer pressure of everybody else sitting down and you clearly stand out as not following what the rest of the group is doing, then I think that helps. So you'd have to ask a proper educator, somebody who does this for a living, maybe even PhD educator, if like enforcing rules in class makes it easier to get specific compliance with rules, and I feel like the answer is probably going to be yes. So we disagree there. So that's no point on that one for either of the parties. And then ZDogg is additionally worried about things that the Dr. Stock does not bring up, but yeah, we could infer his position, I suppose. Worried about language development and socialization, and he would like to see teachers masked and vaccinated, which I would too, but he would like to see kids not masked or vaccinated, and that appears to be putting all the risk and only part of the protection on the teacher, and that seems really, yeah, I don't know, that's kind of an anti-teacher point of view. So yeah, that's another X, I'm afraid, red X for ZDogg. All right, next one. And these are also points that they both agree on incorrectly. So Dr. Stock says that there's an animal reservoir for coronavirus. And there's probably a bat reservoir, but we haven't found the real reservoir, if it is in a particular kind of bat in a particular place. I mean, somewhere there are viruses very much like this. And we've gotten sort of close. We've gotten in the vicinity. It seems like mostly bat viruses, but also some pangolin viruses. And so we can't say hand on heart for sure exactly where this thing, where its normal host is. Because whatever you think of it, like even the people with the frankly fringe conspiracy idea that this is coming out of a lab in a particular place, it went into the lab from some kind of animal, and we still haven't found that kind of animal. So, add that to the fact that I don't think there's any evidence it was in the lab, and yeah, you know how I feel about that. They may be talking about the fact that cats and dogs can get the virus a little bit, but when an animal reservoir, like a proper animal reservoir, you've got a virus that's going to stay there, usually without any symptoms, and it's going to last for either a long time or the life of the animal, and probably be transmitted from animal to animal, like from mother to babies or something like that. And we don't have that. You have a very short infection in cats and dogs, short to the point where you don't always even see symptoms in, the worst cases. And it's there and it's gone in the space of, 3 or 4 days from the last paper I read. Maybe there's more information out there now that a veterinarian could fill in, but yeah. So no, that's an acute potential host. And as far as we know still, cats and dogs get it when their owners, family, whatever you want to call them, get it. And they don't seem to be getting it otherwise, and they don't seem to be transmitting it to each other or to people. So that's not a reservoir. Animal reservoir as such does not exist. And so that's wrong, and that's a big mistake, honestly. And both MDs missed that one. So yeah, well, that's how it is sometimes when you're grading. You want everybody to do well on the test, but not everybody does. So there we go. They also both agree that you can't ever make this go away because it's a respiratory virus, is what Dr. Stock says, and ZDogg agrees with this, which again is demonstrably false. How do we know? Well, there's a thing called SARS coronavirus 1, only it's just called SARS coronavirus. And it came from a bat, and it's actually the same species as SARS coronavirus 2. These are just different strains of the species. And they basically do the same thing, infect in roughly the same way. And we got rid of SARS coronavirus 1 without a vaccine, and once we got rid of it, even though it would have infected cats and dogs just the same, that didn't mean a thing. And it's gone, and once we got rid of it, it didn't come back. I think that is the key that gives me hope that we can actually get rid of SARS coronavirus 2, because we've done it before, literally with the same virus. So, yeah, I don't know, all this doom and gloom, and you just better get on with living with it. That is a very political point, but it is not backed up by reality or science. So that is essentially a dumb thing to say, and we should not probably be saying that. Yeah. All right, so that's another big red X, unfortunately, for both docs. But hey, yeah. Fine, there's more questions on the quiz. We still got a chance of pulling out a passing grade. Although, yeah, we're struggling. Okay. Dr. Stock's next point is that they're seeing a peak of virus in the summer, and that this is because of the vaccine. So that's one point, and ZDogg correctly says that that is not the case, which I would agree with. That is definitely not the case. And one way that we know this, so both of them, I believe, agree that wintertime, because you're indoors, causes respiratory viruses to spread. Now, that is also not true. So coronaviruses have always been, they have their peak a little bit after flu season. And so it's more of a spring peak for the human coronaviruses. And nobody's ever really figured out why, but it's a different peak than the peak of flu season, and you get different peaks with lots of other viruses. And so this idea of respiratory viruses coming from the cold temperature or stuff like that does not appear to be well founded. And the other reason why is that there wasn't a flu season this year. There was a constant low level of flu in people, but there was no peak in the winter. And so instead it was just a flat line. So there's a little bit of flu still going around. It's passing a little bit occasionally from person to person. But we basically interrupted the transmission. And flu season is over. Now the question is, if we all eventually get rid of this virus and go back to no masking, high contact, whatever, kiss everybody you meet on the mouth, maybe that'd be a very weird world. But you may see a flu season pop back up, but it may not be a winter flu season because different viruses have different seasons. So the fact that there's been flu around constantly, but flu did not spread more during the winter, according to all the data we have from the CDC, suggests that that is not a good point, but you would have to be looking into the data. And I don't think either of these people have looked into the data. I think they're going with a gut feeling and they're just going to plow forward, which there are probably times when you really want that from your primary care physician. You don't want them to go back, study up, take a couple months to, figure out exactly what should be done. You want some kind of quick, decisive action that's at least pretty likely to get you to the right place. So it's maybe coming from a nice place, but it's dead wrong. And so we got an X on that one. Let's see. The next point that Dr. Stock makes, which is demonstrably false, and ZDogg would agree with me there, and does in his response, is that you have antibody-mediated enhancement, which is when you have some antibodies, and having some antibodies is actually worse for you than having no antibodies. There are diseases like yellow fever and dengue fever, and there's a cat coronavirus where this is a thing. And if you have some antibodies that are okay but not actually good enough to stop the virus, they can potentially make it worse when the virus has a hard time grabbing onto your cells, when it's like a virus from a different animal that's not very good at growing in humans. None of that applies here. It's those are all incorrect. And so that is a check for ZDogg MD and another Red Cross, I'm afraid, for Dr. Stock. Yeah, all right. Better luck next time. See me after class. Let's see. Got a couple more of these. Let's see. Dr. Stock says the vaccine does not prevent infection, only symptoms. There are several large studies. At first, we didn't know this, but then several large studies came out months ago. Yeah. And now, if we're paying attention to current literature, we do know this for sure. And vaccination does reduce catching the virus and also reduces spreading the virus and reduces everything to do with the virus, all the bad things that go with it. So that's, again, not a thing. So, yeah, stop it, Dr. Stock. And that's a point for ZDogg. All right, page 2. Yeah, getting toward the end. Dr. Stock says there's no reason you shouldn't treat vaccinated people different from unvaccinated people. ZDogg says this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. He's actually correct on that one, so that's an X for Stock and a check for ZDogg. They both agree that kids are low risk and so do not need to be tested. Now, this is a problem. And again, I think this is a kind of a physician problem. This is like a problem of perspective. When you've got a physician, they've got one person in front of them, and they've got to do their best to treat that person and get them out the door safely and alive and healthily, because there's going to be another person coming right through the door behind them, and then they're going to have to deal with that. So this is kind of, a lack of bigger perspective. What kids are, and we just published a paper on this in the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. Yeah, hygiene, that's a weird thing, but fine. Yeah. Low symptomatic or non-symptomatic people carry all the worst variants as well, and can be a route for these variants to spread back into the rest of the population. So if you let your kid get COVID at school, unmasked or whatever, then chances are you are going to be exposed to a lot of COVID. Like if you're passing somebody at Walmart that has a bit of COVID in them, there's a small chance you're going to get it, but it's not as big as if you're going to eat dinner with them and breakfast with them every day and, kiss them goodnight and all that stuff that you do because they're your kid. So kids getting COVID is a route for the virus to get inside your house. You're opening the gates and letting it in, and some percentage of even vaccinated people would still be susceptible enough to get infected. I don't know. So I disagree with both on that, and so that's 2 more red X's, unfortunately. They both agree that it is not necessary to mandate vaccines for kids. Kids are 14.6% of the U.S. population. We need to get something like 80% just mathematically for the vaccine to work at a population level, the herd immunity level. And you're basically not going to be able to get there without vaccinating kids. So they are an important part of the herd. And if you throw that part out and do not mandate vaccines for everybody, basically, there's no way we can ever get out from under this. So it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, there's a thing we can do to get out of this, but we're not going to do it, so we can't possibly get out of it. That's the idea here. And that's also wrong. Yeah. Wrong and bad. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Let's see. And then Dr. Stock goes off and says we should treat, because we have treatments, not vaccines. And so he's on board with ivermectin, which is still fundamentally unproven. And honestly, in the trials that I've seen, it doesn't do the thing that people say it's supposed to do, which is reduce the amount of virus. And the only things that it might do are get you out of hospitals sooner. And even then, I think most of the trials, the doctor and patient have both known that they've been on ivermectin, and this may play into it a little bit. I don't know that there is anything you can really rely on there. So I am very, very skeptical, but trials are ongoing. So we'll see. Something could come of that. The other two he's hot on are vitamin D and zinc, which are both nonsense placebos. Bless. Yeah. They're things that could potentially work, but don't work on a human in the way that people would like them to. And so ZDogg agrees these are all placebos, and so check, and check. And unfortunately, no checks for Dr. Stock. Not doing well on this one. Should have studied a little more before the exam. Probably didn't realize this pop quiz was coming, to be fair. Yeah. And then Dr. Stock goes off and says these treated 15 patients, like one more than 14, and that they've all been okay. And the neat thing about the case fatality rate is that you see early on, we have no idea. And so you get very high, very low, whatever, so crazy things. But in every country, it's leveled out over time. And it's been a very constant 2% for most of the last year. In the US, in France, in England, in every country where these things are recorded. So it looks as though neighborhood of 2% case fatality rate, given the amount of testing that is done, appears to be about right. And so, you do the math. Yeah, Dr. Stock, if there's a 2% fatality rate and you only treat 15 people, how many of those would you expect to have been fatal cases if you didn't treat them with these placebos? Yeah, the answer is you would expect them probably all to live, which is good, and it did happen. So I'm happy everybody's okay, but that doesn't prove anything. And again, stop it. Yeah. Okay, one where they differ a little bit, and then this it looks like the last one. Oh my gosh, is that with prior vaccination, there's no benefit of with prior infection, there's no benefit of having a vaccine. So ZDogg says this is a gray area, and I guess technically it is, but he does also acknowledge that there are studies now that show that you get better levels of neutralizing antibody if you revaccinate after having an infection. And there are also studies that I think he may not have read yet that suggest the same thing for T cells and B cells. So basically all the components of immunity get both more numerous, and they actually change. They take kind of another swing at it and get better at doing the job of fighting the virus with vaccination after recovery from COVID-19. So it's not really a gray area, but there hasn't been a large study to show the exact level of protection and how that's boosted when you have natural infection and then a vaccine versus just natural infection and no vaccine. So in that sense, it's a gray area. So we'll give a reluctant pass, but it's another little see me after class to ZDogg. And unfortunately, it's another one wrong on Dr. Stock's paper. So sum it all up, Dr. Stock, I'm afraid, gets a 0 out of 20 on this quiz, which is really not where you want to be. And if you've got 0 out of 20 kind of knowledge, I would feel weird about standing up in front of my local school board and claiming to know or understand or be an expert in this thing. But I don't know. That just seems, that seems really weird. There's nothing scientific. Like basically everything that he's saying is the opposite of what's true, which is super weird. But it's a free country. It's just that I wish people wouldn't listen when just absolute naysayers of everything are talking, no matter how confident they are in their wrong answers. For ZDogg, he ends up with a 13 out of 20, which is a 65%. So it's not quite a D-, but it is a barely passing grade. So congratulations, I guess, but there's still a lot more to reach for there. And I don't know that I believe in you, ZDogg, because I don't know that he's particularly interested in changing any of these opinions. But he's not completely wrong. You can at least say that, right? Yeah, so there we go. So that is the perspective on this Mount Vernon school board meeting craziness and the response to that. And so there you go. Yeah. Thanks very much. This has been Ask Dr. Ben.